Greetings and welcome back to the Old Ways Rising Farm YouTube channel. It's the middle of winter, it's cold outside, it's snowing, it's beautiful to look out the windows and curl up with a book or do inside projects. So we're going to talk about some inside projects today. And I'm actually working on two videos here right at the same time. One about a material and one about a project using the material. And this is that material. So you're like, Adam, that's ugly. What's going on? What's going on with this piece of wood? Well, when I turn this material around, you can see we've got an interior of beautiful black wood. Okay. This is oak. This is a piece of red oak that has been turned black all the way through by soaking it in a solution of dissolved iron. Okay. What we have done here is make artificial bog oak. And this is a really neat thing. It's a project I've been working on for a little while. It does take a little bit of time, but not an inordinate amount of time. Okay. And we can get this beautiful material that isn't just ebonized on a surface, but is struck all the way through with that lovely black color, and then we can carve things out of it. Now, the other project that I'm interlacing with this video is using this to make some scales, knife scales, for these two knives that we made from trap springs in an earlier video. I'll make sure that the Forging Without a Forge video shows up in the end screen. That's where we make those two knives. So, bog oak. Natural bog oak isn't a species of oak. It's something that happened to a tree. So when an oak tree falls into a bog, it falls into an anaerobic, high acidity environment. Okay. I said I'm soaking this in iron. Iron ions tend to be highly insoluble, meaning they will not dissolve, when you have an oxygenated environment and a neutral to high pH. Okay? Those lead to iron not being able to dissolve. But when you have acidic conditions and or anaerobic conditions, iron can dissolve very easily. Okay? So when that oak tree falls into the bog, it falls into an environment in which iron can dissolve. Now, the acidity of a bog is tannic acid coming from decaying plant material. Okay? Iron does something fun. When it comes in contact with tannic acid, it forms what's called a chelation complex. Okay? This is ligand chemistry, and we're not going to go into the whole thing on ligand chemistry, but I want to throw the keyword out there in case you want to Wikipedia search it. But it's a whole brand of chemistry that just, in a one-sentence, non-technical nutshell, means stuff sticks together. Okay? And when stuff sticks together in this particular way, often you'll get interesting properties or color changes or other things going on, right? Leather tanning, the whole process of leather tanning is all about chelation chemistry. But when iron sticks to tannic acid through this chemical mechanism, it turns jet black. Okay, it makes instead of being a red or yellow oxide, it becomes a jet black oxide. This is very similar to the chemistry involved in gun bluing or in dyeing traps black. If you're a trapper, dyeing traps black by boiling them in walnut hulls or sumac berries, right? That is all the same exact mode of chemistry. Slightly different things at play depending on which specific method you're talking about, but the same mode of chemistry. So your oak log crashes into a bog, and over a period of thousands and thousands of years, it becomes completely waterlogged, and the water that's logging your log is rich in both iron and tannic acid. Okay? So you have that chelation complex form, that jet black color penetrating, and over a very long period of time, that log will become completely saturated with iron, and then thousands of years later, when somebody goes and exhumes it from said bog because somebody was cutting peat to burn for household fuel or whatever, and they stumble onto a log and drag it out, it then cuts up into this beautiful jet black wood. Okay? Now, obviously, I am not old enough to have spent thousands of years on this project, right? So we want to accelerate it a bit. And I'm going to tell you exactly how to do this. The first thing that you have to get right is you have to pick a good choice of wood. This is red oak. Okay, this is a piece of red oak that caught my eye in a stack of firewood because you can kind of see it here reasonably well on the dirty side. The ripples in it, this is curly red oak. Okay, but just this little piece of it. I actually have two pieces this size. But just these little pieces. So I knew I wasn't going to do a big project out of it, but I always have an eye for things that might eventually become a project. And this is a mindset that I very much recommend you cultivate and, get yourself away from like the modern America just-in-time supply chain, next day shipping mindset, right? Get yourself out of that mindset. Yes, things take time. Green wood takes time to dry, right? This takes a little bit of time to do, and then you have to re-dry it after the soak, right? So it takes a little time. So, don't wait until you need it tomorrow to try and go get your materials. Always be in the mindset of spotting materials, right? This week I found 2 pieces of curly cherry and 1 piece of curly maple in the firewood pile, and I pulled the 3 pieces out and they're drying. They'll be a future project, right? Always have in your mind at any given time, I could spot something that could be a future project. Snag those things and put them on a stack, and you're building a pantry. And then when you have a project you want to accomplish, you have a whole pantry full of materials that you can just go to. And this does take a little time, like I said, but if you start it now, in a couple of years, you'll have it in your pantry, and then you'll snag it for a project. This has been done and ready to work for over a year now, and I just haven't found the right project yet. Right now I do. So, just cultivate that thought process and way of doing things. And then you won't ever have to worry about materials because you've got all the stuff there. For this particular project, red oak is what I would recommend. So, whenever you're looking at a pile of red oak, have this thought, have this project in your head, and you can be ready to do it. So, why red oak? Well, red oak has 3 properties together that make it really good for this idea. The first is it is ring porous. So because it is ring porous, it has wide open pores that can transmit water very, very quickly in a soak. Okay? Ring porous. Can you use a wood that's not ring porous? Yes, but it's going to take forever and a day. Okay? Having it ring porous, the water can go, with your iron in it, can go very quickly the whole length of your piece, and then from those large pores will diffuse sideways a little bit more slowly. Okay? If you have wood that is a very fine-grained wood, like maple would be a poor choice, birch would be a poor choice, because, yes, eventually they will waterlog, but it's going to take a really long time, right? Because you have to diffuse in slowly from all directions, whereas with a ring porous wood, the iron will travel very quickly the whole length, and then only has to diffuse slowly through the fine pores a very short distance. Okay? And if you go halfway through the process and cut a cookie off the end of your piece, you'll see a mottled pattern where all of the large pores have black around them, but then there's still brown wood in between. Right? That's not done yet. So the bigger the pores in your ring porous wood, the faster that will transmit. Now, second criteria, not all ring porous woods are created equal, even if they look equal to the naked eye. White oak would be a bad choice for this because it has what's called tyloses. Tyloses are a mechanism that the tree uses to prevent infection. Okay? So, just like I said, water can just very quickly travel the whole length of these big old pores. So can fungal mycelium. Okay? So red oak is more susceptible to fungal diseases than white oak because white oak has tyloses and red oak doesn't. The white oak, in order to plug up those pores and prevent migration of fungal mycelium, after a section of wood is done being used to transmit water, in that second, third year, the white oak will have another cell type come penetrate into that open pore and then blow up like a balloon and fill the pore up. Okay? So as you look through, and you can really see it in a cross-section under a microscope, you can really see the tyloses. They look like little papery thin veils closing up those pores, right? Because this cell comes in, expands and fills the pore, and then dies, but its cell wall then remains as a plug. Okay? So again, even though white oak looks like red oak to the naked eye, when you really study it, those big open pores really aren't big and open because they have the tyloses plugging them up. That's why white oak is a better shipbuilding wood than red oak, because of the tyloses. But when we want it to absorb stuff and become waterlogged quickly, that hurts our progress. Okay, so we need a ring porous wood that doesn't have tyloses. And then remember that the complex that we're going to form that's going to make our black color depends on the interaction between tannic acid and the iron. You have to have both. So we need a high tannin wood. Okay, so ash has wide open pores, waterlogs quickly, does not have tyloses, but it also does not have tannic acid in it, at least not in any appreciable quantity. So if you were to do this with white oak, yes, it would absorb all of this iron, but it would just come up looking dirty, ugly yellow. It wouldn't take on, or I'm sorry, white ash, yeah. Thank you, Ed. So it would just take on this dirty color, and it would just look like dirty ash wood. It wouldn't turn the nice, pretty black that we're looking to. So we need those three criteria together. And here I'm talking to you from the context of northeastern United States. Red oak is, and all of the red oaks together, the whole red oak group have the same characteristics. I don't care whether it's northern red oak or pin oak or scarlet oak or black oak or what, right? They all have high tannin wood, large open pores, and no tyloses. Okay, they are all equally good for this project, and here in our context, they're the best ones. Okay, white oak, black locust, and black walnut are all ring porous woods. They all have fairly large pores. One are a little smaller. They're all high in tannin, but they all have tyloses. Okay, and then ash is ring porous, but it doesn't have enough tannin to make the black color. And then your maple has neither tannin nor good pores. Okay, so use red oak. Use red oak for this particular project. Now, also note, there's a color difference. Can they see this well, hon?
Yes.
Okay. There's a color difference between the heartwood, which is a very dark black, and the sapwood, which is more of a gray color. And just for me handling it, they're starting to get some more of the orange kind of rubbed on them. But you can still mostly see that. And this is the tannic acid difference. These have both absorbed the same amount of iron. Okay? But the heartwood has more acidity, the sapwood has less. And you can actually kind of see a wavy line here, from the heartwood that's been highly enriched in the acid and sapwood that is. It isn't just like right on one growth ring, which is kind of interesting, right? You can see that process of filling the heartwood with the waste acids and the preservatives that keep the tree healthy. So if you absolutely or want the darkest dark color that you can get from a particular piece of wood, try to weight toward the heartwood. If you're just, hey, that's a cool piece of firewood, I want to tinker with it, go for it. Tinker with it. I think that gray is still pretty. I'm still going to use it. I actually think the line is kind of neat, and I might center my project right on that line. I've got to think that through when I cut out my blanks. So that's the main idea, right? You've got to pick a good wood that's going to absorb water quickly. Now, time. I was soaking this piece, and you can see here there's no modeling on the end grain, right after I cut off the cookie. They can't see that?
It's in shadow.
Can we...
Yeah, we can see that.
That's the cookie that I cut off.
Yeah.
Right? It's smooth in color.
Yes.
Okay. That's how you know it's done. Now, if you get into the core of it, and you're cutting out your pieces, and you think it's smoothly done, you cut off a little cookie, it all looks good, then you get into your core and you find a little spot where it's modeled, you have two choices. One, accept the character, or two, take a little bit of your iron solution and put a wash over the surface. And it'll just darken that little splotch. Mm-hmm. So that's okay. That's not the end of a project if you find a little bit of a brown core. And actual naturally occurring bog oak has different color phases. Some of it's gray, some of it's really, really dark black, some of it is mottled. In the natural environment, you have a supply of tannic acid other than just the wood. So if an ash tree falls into a bog, it will become jet black because there's tannin from the environment. Okay? So, you know, if you were to take this gray section and wash tannic acid over it, the surface would darken. Just as if you find a spot in the middle that didn't quite absorb as much iron as the rest, a little wash of iron would darken it, right? So that's kind of the difference between the natural and the artificial that we're going to make, the simulated bog oak that we're going to make here today. But again, there's a range of colors in natural bog oak as well. So I'm totally fine with that. I like character in my work. I like materials that have a story and don't look like injected plastic with machine-made perfection. If you want that, you can go to the cheap mart and you can get all sorts of cheap machine plastic molded junk, right? You're here making projects like this because you want something that looks real, right? You know, so that's the intro. Now, as I said, always keep your eye open for things. This is what we're going to turn into bog oak here today. And it's not going to be done today. I'm not going to have the end result of these in this video. Those soaked for 2 years and then dried for a third. Okay, those pieces. And then dried for a third. And I started this, I literally started soaking them during the pandemic. Right, that's when I started that project, right? And I let them go for 2 years, let them dry for a third year, and then it was a year after they were dry till I found a happy little project for them, you know? So keep your eye out for stuff. This is a pair of tomato stakes, 1 inch by 1 inch oak tomato stakes that I just bought at a garden center. So I get a lot of my wood project materials from firewood piles and from roaming around the forest. And, oh, there's a boomerang in that branch, right? But even if you're in an urban context, you can still keep your eye open for stuff, right? These are 1 inch by 1 inch tomato stakes, and you're probably not going to be able to pick up the grain pattern on camera, but they're super twisty and warped because there's a lot of figure in the wood. So I don't have a specific project in mind for these. Maybe pen blanks, maybe little handles for an awl, maybe something else. But I found them, and I'm going to turn them into another batch of artificial bog oak, and I'll show you how I set up that process, and then we'll wait together a couple years for them to be ready. So we have all of our materials gathered in order to get this project rolling. Before I dive into it, I just want to mention that we are an unsponsored, unmonetized YouTube channel, so we can be very objective and honest with you about everything, and I am so grateful for the patrons that we have that help make that possible. And if you'd like to join as a patron, we would be most grateful for that as well. And if you wander over to the Patreon site, there's a link in the description box. We have a digital store there full of resources that will help you with this sort of project, historical resources, plans and patterns, and all of that is going to increase. They are available for an outright sale if you don't want to join as a patron, but if you join as a patron at any paid level, even the $1 a month, then all of those things become immediately free. So you can have complete unlimited access to those resources. So wanted to mention that, and again, express how grateful we are to everybody who's there. So the materials for this are very, very simple. We need cheap distilled vinegar. We need a little bit of dish soap, and I'll explain that in a minute. And we need a source of iron to dissolve. Now, what I'm using for my source of iron is grinder filings, just from underneath the bench grinder. Okay. Now, I already started setting this up and showed all of that, and then discovered that the sound was corrupted. Something went wrong with the sound. So I'm redoing it, and I will show you in this very brief, sadly soundless clip about how much iron filings have already been added. So there you go, sad, soundless iron filings. Now, to set this up, we just fill in a little bit of vinegar. And as you can see, I've already done this quite a bit. We add just a little bit of a squeeze of dish soap. And then we dump in our iron filings. And that's all there is to it. Now, the reason that we have a little bit of dish soap in there is because most sources of iron are going to have a little bit of oil on them. Okay, the grinder filings, you don't know what was being ground. You know, a lot of stuff. You know, the tool may have been oiled in some way before it was ground. We just want to get that residue off. If you don't have a grinder with a whole pile of filings underneath it, you can do exactly the same thing very easily with steel wool. Okay. And iron filings and steel wool are the best two sources of iron to dissolve because it's so fine and there's so much surface area, so it goes quickly. But steel wool is always packaged with an oil film. I don't know exactly what it is. It's something in the WD-40 family of oil films, right? So a little bit of dish soap in there will help dissolve that so that the vinegar can actually work on the metal filings. If you don't have either of those two things, and you don't want to spend money on steel wool, if you have some rusty nails, you can just chunk them in here. This first batch was just 3 or 4 rusty nails, which were completely dissolved. And when I dried that down, I got this little baggie full of nice yellow ochre. This is some sort of geothite-based yellow ochre. The acetic acid evaporates, and as it does, the iron is free to combine with oxygen and make a geothite or a limonite. Okay, so that's a nice paint pigment. So I scraped that up. You could actually redissolve that for this, but I scraped that up to use as a paint pigment because that's valuable in its own right. And those iron filings are literally useless for anything else but this. So we'll use them to color our oak black, and then what is left over will, again, be some more paint pigment. Now, we mix all of this up, and when you can see a little bit of foam, can they see in here well, beloved? Mm-hmm. Right. When you can see a little bit of foam in there, as the vinegar works on the iron filings, it will release some traces of gas. This is mostly hydrogen gas being released from the acid that's consumed. Very, very small amounts. It's not dangerous in any way. But you will see it working a little bit. That's normal. Okay, just the reaction between the metal and the vinegar. And you can see this piece that I just kind of left in here while I went and ran to find a new batch of iron filings is already starting to blacken. Okay, so this works very, very quickly. And if I give that a bit of a stir, you'll see just how black the bottom of this is. And that's all of that iron mixing back up in. Okay. So that iron will all dissolve, be liberated, and then be slowly absorbed by the oak. Okay. Now you can see, even though this is starting to darken, right, if we compare it to a fresh piece, right, very dark on that face, that's where it was sitting up and a little bit collected on top, right? But even the sides starting to darken a little. But it's still floating. Okay, it is not fully waterlogged. it will take several months for this to sink. Once this has sunk, then you know that those very large pores are filled up with the iron. But then it needs more time to slowly diffuse out. Okay, so I'm just going to get the rest of these put in here. Make it a mess. The longer this works, the more annoying it is to make a mess with it, because, you know, as mentioned there, this stuff actually makes a pretty darn good paint pigment. So you want to put this in a spot where it's not going to get messed up. And now I'm just going to hold those down with my hands so they don't float, and fill this all the way up with straight vinegar. You want this to be as acidic as possible, so you don't want to use a vinegar water mixture. You do want to use a really strong, strong distilled white vinegar or a strong cooking vinegar. And now, let's see, this one's taken color already just from putting it in there. Mm-hmm. These need to absorb a bit before we'll see any change. But only those two were soaking in there for the last hour while I reassembled materials. But even some of these are starting to change shade a little bit. The more tannic acid in a particular piece, the faster it will turn black and the blacker it will get. Mm-hmm. Okay. So now we just let them soak. So just for a last little clip in this video, I just wanted to show you, I cut out this piece of our work block that's going to be scale handles for these two long handle carving knives that we made in that Forging Without a Forge video a few months ago. And since I've just cut it, you can see the interior of it here. Beautiful black color all the way through, nice natural color variation, and the same in the end grain. So it is fully saturated, completely saturated with the iron. And that's the big difference between this and what they call ebonizing of wood, right, where you're just treating the surface with a dye, but it's only skin deep. If you sand it and refinish it, there goes your ebonizing, right? Whereas this has been partially mineralized, deliberately partially mineralized in 2 years rather than accidentally partially mineralized in 2,000 years, but nonetheless partially mineralized in the same way. It is a solid piece, it is a consistent color, and anything I choose to do, cutting or carving into this block, will continue to yield that consistent pattern of coloration. So, this is just a nice little project. Yes, it takes a little bit of time to do. It's not instant gratification, but my box is over there sitting, and it's just going to sit in a corner for 2 years, and I'm not going to have to look at it. So it's not a big deal. You just need to invest an hour in setting stuff up once and ignore it, and then it will be there for you for future fun little projects like this. So I hope you do this. Go make something awesome, right? You can do these things. You can scavenge. You can look around. You can find junk and crooked pieces of wood that other people are throwing away, or pick this and that out of a firewood pile, and you can make some really beautiful stuff out of it, right? And again, you can make nicer stuff than you can buy. So make it, don't buy it, right? I hope you do this, and I hope that you join us here next time at Old Ways Rising Farm.